Hope you're having a great day. I wanted to talk to you today about the Battle of Shiloh, which is another battle in the Civil War that happens in a place called Hardin County, Tennessee, which is where that arrow is pointed. What we have going on here is on April 6th to April 8th, the Union Army is working their way down the Tennessee River to go farther into the Confederate territory. By this point, they've captured all of Kentucky and most of Tennessee, so they're trying to work their way down, and this is the next stop, the next battle. The Union is led by a man named Ulysses S. Grant. Now, Grant's a key feature in American history, and you'll hear about him a lot, but he had many different generals underneath him, and his army consisted of about 45,000 men. They had about 6 different divisions, so they were pretty strong. Now, they were encamped in Hardin County, waiting for Major General Buell to arrive with his men. Buell's coming in from out of town, and they're going to link up to create a very, very strong army at that time, and he's bringing about 18,000 men to fight with him. They were waiting for them to come, so when the battle starts on April 6th, Buell wasn't there, but the Confederates were a little different story, and their background is led by a man named Albert Sidney Johnston. He's one of the most experienced officers in America to this time. He participated in about 5 different wars, and he had different generals as well. And so on April 3rd, he took about 40,000 men up the river to greet Grant before Buell and his army could arrive. And he knew they were coming, and they wanted to beat them to them. So on the eve of the battle, both the Union and Confederate armies were close to the same size, but the Confederates were a mess. They didn't have weapons that were good enough at the time. They had antique weapons, they had hunting rifles, they had flintlock muskets, and his plan was to attack the Union to the left, which is to cut them off from the river. That's what Johnston and the Confederate Army wants to do. They planned the attack for April 4th. The problem was there was extensive rain, 48 hours of rain that caused mud, caused units to get lost, and it took them about 3 days to march about 23 miles. Because of this delay, what it allowed the Unions to do is it allowed Buell and his army to arrive and fight with them. Now, another problem, the Confederates only packed enough rations and food for about 5 days. So by the time the fighting started, they were short of food. So they're ready for battle, but the Confederates again were undisciplined. They weren't quiet. In battle, you want to be quiet. They were only a few miles from the Union side, and they were playing their bugles and their drums, and they were hunting. So they made themselves abundantly clear on where they were, but the Unions couldn't hear them. So it didn't hurt them this time, but this would start the battle and the confusion for the Confederate side. So on April 6th, at 6 a.m., the Confederates wanted to surprise the Union Army. This was their plan. The Union Army, remember, did not want to fight. Buell was not with them yet, so they didn't want to go, and they had no idea the Confederates were happening. And by 9 a.m., the Union forces were engaged and moving toward the front lines. Now, the Confederates, they didn't have proper alignment. This map here, let me move this up for you. This map here shows kind of what the outline looks like. The red is the Confederate side. The blue is the Union side. So because the Confederates were so unorganized, the attack didn't have the impact that they wanted, but it kind of worked out. The problem was the Confederates were not unified. Johnston and Beauregard on the Confederate side were not unified in their approach. The Confederate Army was ferocious, though, and the Union Army was fleeing to the river, which is great for them, but there were some problems with that. The Union Army had the great leadership, and General Sherman inspired his troops to resist and to keep fighting, even though he had minor wounds and 3 of his horses were shot out from underneath him. They were able to resist for a time, and the Confederates made progress until about noon, because when the Union left their encampments, they left a lot of food. And the Confederate side was hungry. They didn't have the food. And so when they found food, they said, time, we're gonna eat, and then we'll go continue the fighting. So what this did is it gave the Union time to regroup and create a new formation. They created what's called the Hornet's Nest. This is what the Hornet's Nest looks like in the blue side. The Confederates attacked this formation for several hours. Instead of bypassing it and going around it, they just continued to try to fight through it. And because of this, they suffered heavy casualties. They attacked from the left and the right, and what the nest did is it kind of bowed in and it pushed it out a little bit. And because of this formation and the confusion and the lack of leadership, the Confederates took about 7 hours to finally overtake that nest. Now, Johnston is right there fighting with his men and realizing, hey, we have an opportunity here. He tried to rally his men to keep moving forward, but he was shot in the leg during this event. And after being shot, Johnston kept fighting, but eventually his staff noticed he was slumped over in his saddle because he had sent his personal surgeon and medical professionals to the front lines to help his men and no one to help him. And he eventually died from internal bleeding on the first day of battle. So the Confederates are all a mess. They don't have a plan, they were ununified, they were not quiet, and now their leader is dead. So Beauregard is now in charge, and he's in the rear. He has no idea what's happening on the front lines, and he has no idea that they are close to pushing through this nest. But at 6 p.m., he calls off the attacks, and he allows the Union and Confederate Army to rest at 6 p.m. Now, on this evening, the Confederate troops are exhausted. But Beauregard sends a message to the Confederate President Jefferson Davis and says, hey, we won. Confederates won. It's over. But by stopping the fighting at 6 p.m., it allowed the Union to regroup, and it allowed Buell and his 18,000 men to join the battle with them. And Sherman said to Grant at the time, well, Grant, we've had the devil's own day, haven't we? And Grant replied, yep, but we'll lick 'em tomorrow. The Union wasn't done fighting. So the Union now had 45,000 men. The Confederates had only about 20,000, and Beauregard had no idea the Union grew. And that morning, the Union launched counterattacks. You can see in the blue, they're moving forward, and the Confederate Army is unsure, and they're falling back. They're trying to fight, but they keep falling back because they realize they're low on ammunition. They had no food. They'd lost 10,000 men. And so they keep going farther and farther back. So by the night of April 7th, they're all the way back where Beauregard was. Realizing this, Grant did not pursue them to finish them off. And he was really vilified in the Union people because he didn't do that. But what he did is on April 8th, he sends Sherman to find out where they are. Where did the Confederates go? Are they retreating? Were they regrouping for another attack? And Sherman and his men marched about 6 miles and found the Confederates and a field hospital. Now, the road getting there was trees were all fallen all over the place, and it took a while for them to finally get through. But a Confederate colonel named Nathan Forrest ordered a charge from the Confederate side to fight back. He realized the Union was ready to fight. So the Confederate Army falls back, but Forrest is left by himself and gets shot, but lives. But that's kind of how the Battle of Shiloh does end. After the Union captured the field hospital, Sherman realized they showed no signs of attacking. He withdrew the Union back to their camps, and with this victory, the Union Army marched farther south into the Confederate territory. It was a 2-day battle. It was the costliest in American history at this time, with the Union having 13,000 casualties, and the Confederates having about 11,000 casualties. Grant, at the beginning of the war, said it's going to take one big battle for this war to end, and this was that one big battle, but it didn't end. So the discussion post for today is consider the major battles we've talked about to this point. The Battle of Bull Run, Ironclads, the Battle of Shiloh. How did these battles affect public opinion about the war? How did this affect public perception of the Union and Confederate successes and failures at this time? Remember to make comment, give extensive comments, write a great response with references to the readings, and what you've read about and learned about and watched. Make sure you reference that and comment on a couple of classmates' posts, and I'm looking forward to reading with you. That would be the end of my lesson, and so one of the things that we will do at that point is we will go and I will use a couple different things. The American Battlefield Trust has a great, extensive interactive map about the Battle of Shiloh that students can click on to learn more about many different things on their own pace. They will also have history.com. I will have this article for them as well. And this battle gives a great analysis of the Battle of Shiloh as well. So it gives, the interactive is for different students. The history.com is going to be for more the higher ability learners. And then we'll also have a video. I don't want to put a long video up. There's plenty of long videos, but this video is going to be about 2 minutes. And I really want them to watch this and kind of learn. So I'm differentiating for many different learners to help them learn about the Battle of Shiloh and giving them every opportunity in many different tools.